You need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GBNews.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hello and welcome to We Need to Talk About on GB News with me, Alex Phillips, where we get stuck into the big issues of the day that need looking at in depth. Nothing is off the table and no one will be cancelled for saying what they think. Keeping me company today is columnist and political commentator Patrick O'Flynn, and here's what we've got coming up on the show. Yet again, his men are behaving badly, but Boris claims not to have known, and so did nothing about it. A pattern is starting to emerge. While backbench rebels smell blood and plot, do the public care? Fuel protests are causing major disruption on the M4, but with people having to quit jobs over the cost of petrol, is their demonstration justified? And we'll be discussing why have people stopped having kids? And the new legislation to ban mixed-sex toilets. That's what we're talking about for the next hour. What do you need to talk about? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet me @gbnews. First, though, it's time for the GB News headlines with Rosie. Good afternoon to you. It's coming up to 2 minutes past 2. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. Now, at least 2 people have been injured, one seriously, following a gas explosion in Bedford. We can go direct to the scene because our home and security editor, Mark White, is there. Mark, what more can you tell us?
Well, we're just overlooking the block of flats where this incident occurred just before 9:30 this morning. In fact, I'm just going to get out of the way, allow Andrew, our cameraman, to zoom in. Might be a little bit messy, but we'll just zoom in, give you the best shot we can. You can see it is a scene of absolute devastation in that block of flats. It's a block of flats of 20 flats, all of them. It looks, from what we can see, and certainly the information we're getting from the emergency services, all 20 flats have been destroyed by the ensuing fire. It was, according to the emergency services, a gas explosion that ripped through one of the properties here just before 9:30. 2 people have been taken to hospital. One of those taken to hospital is seriously injured, having suffered multiple injuries in the explosion. He was flown to Addenbrooke's Hospital by the air ambulance, which landed in the field just near to where this block of flats is. So everyone in the block of flats has been evacuated from the area. They are being housed in a nearby community centre while the local authorities try to determine what the next move is for them. And of course, the investigation is underway to determine exactly what caused this gas explosion. We're not aware at this stage of any other casualties, but clearly the emergency services are still here. They are trained in urban search and rescue, and their teams will be sifting through the rubble of the building behind me as they look for other potential victims.
Mark, thank you very much. Live on the scene there at that gas explosion in Bedford. We'll keep you up to date with developments here. Now, in other news, the Prime Minister was aware of concerns about Chris Pincher's behaviour when he made him Deputy Chief Tory Whip. Downing Street says despite knowing about speculations, Boris Johnson didn't think it was appropriate to block his appointment. The Prime Minister is alleged to have called him Pincher by name, Pincher by nature.
Chris Pincher was suspended from the Conservative Party and resigned after claims emerged last week that he groped 2 men. Well, since then, 6 new allegations have emerged, dating back several years, all of which Mr Pincher denies. The shooting in Copenhagen is not thought to be linked to terrorism, with Danish police saying there's no evidence to support that. At least 3 people were killed. 4 were injured when a gunman opened fire in one of the biggest shopping centres in the country yesterday. Video from outside the complex shows shoppers running away. Witnesses say others hid inside. A 22-year-old Danish man is appearing in court today. Well, Peter Nordsmark's daughter was in the shopping centre when the shooting started.
Yeah, it was terrible because she was calling me that there are gunshots in fields, there's a shooting, I'm running out and I heard in the background as he said that, these 2 boom, boom, something like that. I could hear it.
12 protesters have been arrested on suspicion of committing a public order offence after go-slow motorway demonstrations today against high fuel prices. There's been significant disruption on the M4 in South Wales and the M5 from Devon to Bristol as protesters deliberately slowed down. The Severn Bridge was closed for over an hour this morning. Police told demonstrators they could not stop and must drive no slower than 30 miles per hour. It's as the price of petrol hit a record high of more than 191.5 pence per litre. Protester Vicky Stamper says she lost her job as a lorry driver because she couldn't afford to fill up.
People need to realise that the government works for us, not the other way around. And I think a lot of people have mistaken that. And they need to pull the head out the backsides, basically, and wake up to this. Because it's not going to end until something gets done.
An EasyJet flight to Menorca had to be escorted to its destination by a Spanish fighter jet. It's after a British teenager on board allegedly posted a bomb threat on social media. An 18-year-old was arrested and is due to appear in court. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, back to Alex for today's We Need to Talk About.
We really need to talk about what Boris does and doesn't know. Because when it comes to stuff he really ought to know, but it's rather inconvenient when found out that he did, it always transpires that he wasn't told or didn't realise, or perhaps had temporary amnesia. It's pretty clear that he probably did know a lot of the dodgy behaviour of his cronies, from alleged gropings by some to parties, to dodgy deals by others, and dismissed it with a chortle, because that's what privileged people do. When it comes to meting out reprisals when dastardly doings are found out, he doesn't, because he'd condoned it all along. It's that attitude of boys will be boys, they're just letting off steam and it's all jolly hockey sticks, with scandals initially denied as pure poppycock, before admitting it was a beastly affair and saying, "Pip, pip, old chum," as pressure finally mounts. It's the same thing over and over again, and betrays a Bullingdon Club culture that isn't being reined in because Boris doesn't want to be bad cop. Well, when you're running a country, being unpopular and making the tough calls is central to the job. Well, joining me in the studio is GB News political correspondent Tom Harwood and columnist and political commentator Patrick O'Flynn. Tom, let's start with you. Give me the latest.
It's interesting, really, given the position of Downing Street, which has moved considerably from where it was on Thursday night, of course, when the whip wasn't even suspended from Christopher Pincher. The argument of Downing Street at that point was that no formal complaint had been brought forward. All they knew officially was, of course, the resignation letter as Deputy Chief Whip, where Christopher Pincher said he got too drunk and embarrassed himself without referencing any specific allegations. What happened then over the the next 24 hours, really, was that an official complaint was lodged. And at that moment, Christopher Pincher lost the whip. But the conversation moved on over the weekend, of course, as we learnt of further allegations, indeed one which is believed to be being brought forward as a police complaint now, with allegations stretching back over several years against Christopher Pincher. The question is, as you were rightly pointing out in your introduction, what did the Prime Minister know and when? But I think that there is an important distinction to make here between the sort of Westminster rumour that everyone hears about, some of which are true, some of which aren't true, and there were certainly lots of rumours around Chris Pincher. But whether or not they were true, I suppose, is a bigger question. Should there have been more due diligence done with regard to the Prime Minister checking whether these rumours had been true? Of course, Christopher Pincher was cleared by an investigation back in 2017 of one accusation it was quite a detailed accusation levelled at the time. It was historic. It was coming on rather too strongly to someone who did not want that to happen. No, it's a very tricky situation here because we're dealing with what someone knew, what judgment they called, and really we'll be hearing more on this, undoubtedly, from the Prime Minister at 3:30 this afternoon as he stands up to make a statement in the House of Commons, ostensibly about NATO, about CHOGM, about the G7, but no doubt the questions that will be brought from members of the House of Commons to the Prime Minister will also include this sleazy story.
Yeah, Patrick, it's not the first time we are asking what the Prime Minister actually knew and why he didn't act sooner, is it? This is multiple occasions this has happened, whether you're looking at Owen Paterson, whether you're looking at Partygate. He seems to have this habit of saying, well, I didn't know anything about it, and people saying, why not? And trying to sort of cover it up and save people before being forced, essentially, to act.
Yeah, I think that's true. I don't think you could regard Boris Johnson as particularly strong on these issues of party discipline or taking them particularly seriously. On the other hand, you know, this has gone on for far before Boris Johnson became Prime Minister. Chris Pincher, you know, rose to positions of prominence under David Cameron and Theresa May. And Tom is right. When you're a political journalist who operates mainly out of the House of Commons, you hear all kinds of rumours, some of which are substantiated, some of which aren't. I think personally it's a bit of a stretch to try and, as various columnists have done, to say this is all because of the Prime Minister setting some kind of permissive attitude. You know, you think back in the previous Parliament, again, when Theresa May was Prime Minister, Charlie Elphicke got sent to prison. You know, there have been quite a lot of sleaze allegations and indeed cases that have come up for many, many years. I think the problem now really is that the British people are in a pretty bad mood with politics in general. We have had a series of crises with falling living standards and the kind of propensity to kind of brush this off. It's very difficult. So I don't think we'll ever see this Prime Minister become that iron disciplinarian. As he said the other day, you know, he's not going to invent a new personality.
Yeah, I mean, British people are in a bad mood, but so too are his backbenchers. And it's given them rope again, hasn't it, to start plotting? That's exactly the case. I mean, it's hard to think that this would be the size of political story it is today were the economy going gangbusters, had Partygate not have occurred, had the Prime Minister not been in this rather weakened position in which he finds himself now. Potentially, this would be seen in the context of those other scandals that, of course, have happened under every Prime Minister since time immemorial. There have been wrong-uns in the House of Commons. Now, we must say, in the context of all of this, that Chris Pincher denies the allegations, that there is a due process due to take place, that these are allegations as things stand. However, there have been quite a few of them, and as we've all been discussing, we've heard these stories in Westminster. There are several MPs who these stories sort of float around, and I suppose it's now for those investigations to really get to the bottom of what did happen. Let's get to the bottom of what the public mood is when it comes to this story. We're going to go to Chris Curtis, who's head of political polling at Opinion Research. Chris, the latest in scandals dogging Boris Johnson, largely about those people around him. But do you think that this is something that the public really take on board, or are we just sort of shrugging our shoulders and are almost used to it, vaccinated against it by now?
Well, I think the thing to bear in mind when a new scandal comes along, and God, there's new scandals coming along all the time, is the kind of behaviour we're hearing about any worse than people expected, or did they basically assume that this was going on anyway? And I think, unfortunately, there was an expectation that this is the kind of way Westminster acts and Westminster behaves all the time. And that's actually one of the reasons why I don't, it's a real pessimistic reason, but it's one of the reasons why I don't expect something like this to move the dial in any particular direction. Because I think to a certain extent, you're right. The public are so used now to hearing about the regular and constant bad behaviour of Conservative or MPs in general, that it's not one of those things that has much of an effect anymore.
The public are also getting used to things not being done quickly when scandals emerge. And at the same time, we're also very used to hearing with opposition benches shouting off with his head and, they must lose their job the minute there is any sort of hint of accusation. Where do you think that the sentiment is between those two things?
Well, I mean, I think that the public always want people to resign as quickly as possible at any sort of hint of a scandal. I mean, we're still in a situation where around 6 in 10 people want the Prime Minister to resign, and I don't think most people would say the Prime Minister's behaviour has been as bad as Christopher Pincher has been accused of. So, look, I think that this is always a. This is always a situation where the public do want strong leadership. They want a leader who's going to respond quickly. They want a leader who's going to be disciplined on the people around him. Boris Johnson, as you were just discussing, has shown himself on this occasion, but also on Owen Paterson in the past and many other occasions, to not be that kind of person. And actually, I think that's one of the key reasons, one of many, but one of the key reasons why we're seeing such negative opinion polling for him at the moment.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to my guys in the studio here. Chris, they're saying 6 in 10 want Boris to resign. They haven't forgiven him for his own misdeeds and perhaps, enabling a culture of ill discipline that just wouldn't cut the muster in a normal workplace. I mean, what do you think it is, Tom, about Boris's personality? Is it because he's actually quite non-confrontational and doesn't like being on the wrong side of people?
Do you know what? I've spoken to staff in Downing Street over the last few months, mainly with regard to the Partygate situation, and you just get the sense that Boris is someone who's always wanted to be liked, and that leads into so many different situations. Wanted his staff to have a good time, didn't want to be the disciplinarian, certainly didn't want to be the Gordon Brown style Prime Minister throwing printers around and all the other allegations that were levelled against him. No, it seems that the Prime Minister just wants people to like him, and that really does create some issues, particularly when it comes to discipline and not wanting to have those big confrontational moments. And perhaps it would be easier if everyone was pretended to be all nice and that there are no issues. But that of course creates problems. However, we also need to look at the context in which we're sitting. Of course, these sorts of scandals happen under every Prime Minister, and it is very normal for lots of the country to want a Prime Minister to resign in the middle of a parliament.
I mean, is this a problem we're seeing played out here? He's a man who just wants to be liked, and the nation did all love him and fall in love with him. That was the Boris Johnson magic fairy dust that managed to unite both wings of his party, get the red wall and the red trousers of the Conservative Party faithful. But when the going gets tough, being likeable just doesn't work.
I think that's exactly right. I think by inclination, Boris Johnson, in terms of personal matters, is a bit of a libertarian. He likes the idea, merry England of King Charles II almost. He's not by any stretch, puritanical. I think there is a strong element of wanting to be liked, as Tom was saying, by everyone around him. Bernard Ingham, who was Margaret Thatcher's press secretary, had a saying of, "Please spare me a politician who needs to be liked." And Boris is having to kind of grow up in office, I suppose, which is not necessarily the ideal way around. And, if we were in a happier spell with living standards increasing, the economy doing very well, then I don't think the stories would cut quite as hard as they do. I'm still personally to be convinced of that 60% saying, oh yeah, Boris should resign. The level of intensity behind that view, is that something that's actually going to affect people's votes? It always seems to me that's probably a more exciting answer to give an opinion pollster than a shrug, don't know, or no.
Well, let's go back to Chris and put exactly that to him. I mean, this 6 in 10 who want Boris to resign, would we be safe in assuming that, 5 out of the 10 might be those who would back Labour anyway? And actually, the amount of discontent amongst the general public who back Boris isn't as bad as it may look.
I mean, if 5 out of 10 are saying that they're going to back Labour anyway, then my God, the Conservatives are in a much worse situation than we thought, because they've just got themselves their comfortable majority already, if that's the case. I think that what we're seeing here is pretty consistent across everything. And that's the reason, I think the Conservatives have a lot to worry about at the moment. You're right, it's easy, particularly midterm, when people are a little bit upset, to tell us posters that they want the Prime Minister to resign. But there's lots of other scary numbers out there for the Conservatives as well. Nearly half of those who voted Conservative at the last general election currently don't tell us that they'd vote Conservative if there was a general election tomorrow. The economy, the crucial reason why people trust and vote for the Conservatives are losing faith on that issue in lots of opinion polls. Labour now leads the Tories on that question of who would be best to manage the economy. More people in many polls say they think Keir Starmer would make a better Prime Minister to Boris Johnson. More people say they think a Labour government would be better than a Conservative government. So, you can pick apart a single question. And I think there's another question about whether this is midterm blues. But I think given the consistency we're seeing across all polling at the moment, I do think that the Conservatives are in a difficult place, and they're going to have to take some big, bold decisions if they want to bring this back in time for the next election.
Chris, always love having you on. Thank you so much for your insights. Fascinating, as always, to hear your views. Thank you as well to Tom and to Patrick for their thoughts on this topic, and I want to know yours. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews. You are with GB News on TV and radio. Coming up, fuel price protesters take to motorways across the UK as prices at the pumps go up again. Time for a short break now. I'm going to check on the weather forecast.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. A lot of cloud across the UK today with showers in the north, but mostly fine in the south where some brighter spells are coming through from time to time. Low pressure sits to the north of the UK, just beside Iceland. High pressure to the west, that's trying to move in, and it will eventually bring more settled weather more widely later this week. But for the time being, it's fairly cool. It's fairly changeable out there, a lot of cloud cover and some showers continuing into the evening for northern England, Scotland, as well as Northern Ireland. Eventually the showers become confined to northern and northwestern coasts, drier with clear spells elsewhere, and temperatures falling away, single figures in some sheltered spots, so a cool night to come. But a bright start to Tuesday for many, with the best of the sunshine in the south and the east, areas of cloud elsewhere, and again a few showers coming into North Wales, northwest England and parts of northern Scotland. Scotland sees some sunshine for a time, as well as northern England and North Wales, but further south a lot of cloud cover, and as a result temperatures not far from average. We're looking at high teens, low 20s in many spots. Outbreaks of rain then turn up for western Scotland and Northern Ireland, and that rain becomes heavier and more persistent over the western hills of Scotland in particular, with outbreaks of rain sinking into North Wales, Northern England, eastern Scotland, as well as Northern Ireland at times. Wednesday morning then begins with clear spells in the south and 14 or 15 Celsius, but outbreaks of rain and a gusty wind further north. Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, changeable weather through much of the day. Rain on and off, that blustery wind and more persistent wet weather continuing for western parts of Scotland, particularly over the higher ground. Thursday and Friday sees more widely drier and brighter weather develop, and temperatures, especially in the south, will rise up to the high 20s by Friday.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Look, we know we're being mugged off by petrol stations when wholesale fuel costs have dropped, but the price at the pump continues to go up. But making life even more miserable for motorists by blocking roads and creating tailbacks that will guzzle up the gallons hardly seems a rational approach. Meanwhile, we've still got the climate loonies gluing themselves to everything, as if drivers are going to sympathise with brave Tarquin's Point and start taking a flying unicorn to work instead. I do have sympathy with the first lot, who want us all to be able to fill our tanks at a reasonable price. So here's my suggestion. Let's set up a Mad Max-style duel on the M25 where the fuel hike heroes can form a convoy of their favourite vehicles to face down the swampies in the central carriageway, and we can all get the day off work to watch.
Everyday people, so that's why we're here. We're here to make a stand against the big fuel companies, basically. So, yeah.
Why are you here today?
I'm here today to join in the fuel protests because fuel prices are getting ridiculous now, with over 40% plus tax. So 100 quid worth of fuel, 40 quid of that goes to tax. So I find it a bit ridiculous, as my hobby is to drive, and it's really affecting my bank balance.
Well, earlier, protesters in Colchester in Essex were making those comments. Let's talk now to Howard Cox, founder of the campaign group Fair Fuel UK. Howard, I mean, I sympathise with the message here. People are really struggling to fill their cars with petrol. Some people having to think about quitting jobs because they can't get to their workplaces, especially self-employed people. But surely creating huge delays on motorways is not going to help the situation.
Yeah, thank you for being on your show. It's a pleasure to be on it. Quite honestly, I have nothing to do with these protests. I support the objective, the aim of actually trying to cut fuel duty. I've been doing it for the last 13 years and been on on GB News many times. The simple fact here is that we've got to give a nudge to the government. So I support the principle of legal protesting today. They mustn't upset or stop emergency services getting anywhere. And I was told by most of the actual protesters who are involved in organising it that they're just going to slow down the slow lane on 3-lane motorways. So I was supporting that. They weren't gluing themselves anywhere and they were not breaking the law. But unfortunately, I understand there are some people that have caused some problems, and I'm not supporting that one bit.
Let's go to the real issue at hand here, which is the cost of petrol at the pump. From your perspective, where does the blame lie?
Well, it's in two areas. I mean, I'm afraid the government have got to take some blame for this. They're still taking just under half of what goes into our tank as tax. And don't forget, they've got a shed load of VAT in the last 12 months, something like 3 to 4 billion extra because of the high prices. That's extra VAT, which wasn't expected. And don't forget, the VAT is also put on the fuel duty, a double taxation, which I think is immoral. The other aspect, of course, is the fuel supply chain itself. Every time oil prices go up, which are positioned by who knows makes that decision, OPEC countries, speculators and people in the city who are gambling on the price of oil on a daily basis, they are making a massive amount of money and profit. And as you know, the government have actually put in a windfall tax on those people. And so the combination of the VAT of 3 billion and that 5 billion windfall tax gives us about 9 billion, which will give us what we're calling for is at least a 20p cut in fuel duty.
Yeah, we could definitely do with that. Howard Cox, thank you ever so much for coming on the programme, founder of Fair Fuel UK. Well, let's talk now to Gordon Balmer, Executive Director of the Petrol Retailers Association. Gordon, you're not a popular man today, are you? So Howard Cox there saying that, yes, government put a lot of tax on our fuel. Almost half of it goes to the government in almost...
Sorry, I can't hear the question, I'm afraid.
Right, let me repeat. So we have Howard Cox on earlier from Fair Fuel UK. Okay. He levels half of the blame.
Yeah, I can hear you.
OK, right. Well, we are going to see if we can sort out the audio with you first. And I'm going to go now to Patrick O'Flynn, who is in the studio. I mean, we just heard from Howard Cox there, founder of Fair Fuel UK, saying, half of what we pay at the pump goes to the government in various stealth taxes almost. Surely they could do more. But then you've got the fuel supply chain who are making massive profits. We know that they are, really gaining from the horrible price hikes that we are having to pay. Does the government need to intervene and say windfall profits if you don't start cutting your prices at the pump?
Well, the government has taken a decision to share in some of the bounty, hasn't it, by bringing in a windfall profits tax on the energy sector, by just letting the extra VAT kind of clock in at a rate of 20% of a bigger number because of the price rises. On the other hand, the government has spent a fortune over the last few years, not least on sort of cushioning the blow of COVID, and the public finances are in a weakened position. My feeling is that I don't really buy that thing that Howard was saying about the protests should be supported because it was only going to slow down one lane of a motorway. I mean, we all know if the slow lane of the motorway gets slowed down, then slow drivers move into the middle lane, that gets slowed down, and middle lane drivers go into the fast lane, and everything gets slowed down. I must say, I have no sympathy with anyone from whatever point of view, whether it be Extinction Rebellion or price of petrol protesters causing gridlock on the roads. I think there needs to be complete zero tolerance against that, and it's completely unfair on the already hassled motorists. I would personally like to see Rishi Sunak do more to try and cushion the blow of petrol prices, perhaps through a VAT cut. But can the government really afford to buck the market to the extent it's going to make a big difference to people, given the global pressures on prices? I'm not sure that it can. I think most voters would just like a little more evidence that the government is basically on their side.
I mean, when you look at fuel prices in the UK and on the continent, largely they're a lot cheaper on the continent, suggesting that, yes, fuel prices are going up, but other governments are being able to intervene to bring them down.
Well, I don't know where you've got that from. I was looking at some European comparisons, and I think we're about in the middle. There are countries which have higher fuel prices than we do, as well as some that have lower. So I don't think personally that the evidence is there that the British motorist is getting hit much harder than motorists in comparable countries. It's just a really horrible time with an oil price shock. That means petrol is simply more expensive, and it's affecting most of us. Most of us are starting to calculate how we get from A to B, whether we cancel visits to family at weekend, and nobody's happy.
Yeah, nobody's happy indeed. Thank you, Patrick. Are you happy? Probably not. Let me know. GBViews at gbnews.uk or tweet us at GBNews. You are with GB News on TV and radio. Coming up, the cost of having kids. The government sets out plans to boost affordable childcare as the UK birth rate plummets to the second lowest level since records began. Now, though, it's time for a check on the news headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 2:33. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. At least 2 people have been injured, one seriously, following a gas explosion in Bedford. Witnesses say a person jumped from a second-floor window to escape as flames erupted from a block of flats in the Redwood Grove area of the town. A major incident was declared as all 3 emergency services attended the scene. The Prime Minister was made aware of concerns about Chris Pincher's behaviour when he made him Deputy Chief Tory Whip. Mr Pincher was suspended from the Conservative Party and resigned after claims emerged that he groped 2 men last week. Since then, 6 new allegations have emerged dating back several years, all of which Mr Pincher denies. Danish police say there's no indication the deadly shooting in Copenhagen was an act of terror. The attack happened at a busy shopping centre yesterday. Witnesses say people hid inside during the attack, while others ran away in a stampede. At least 3 people died, including 2 teenagers. Police say the gunman has mental health issues and appears to have targeted his victims at random. 12 protesters have been arrested on suspicion of committing a public order offence after go-slow motorway demonstrations today against high fuel prices. There's been significant disruption on the M4 in South Wales and the M5 from Devon to Bristol as protesters deliberately slowed down. The Severn Bridge was closed for over an hour earlier today. It's as the price of petrol hit a record high of more than 191 pence per litre. An EasyJet flight to Menorca had to be escorted to its destination by a Spanish fighter jet. It's after a British teenager on board allegedly posted a bomb threat on social media. An 18-year-old was arrested and is due to appear in court. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound buys you $1.215 and 1.163 euros. The price of gold currently stands at £1,488 and 21 pence per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for real-time investment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. Well, before the break, we were discussing the rising cost of petrol and the protests about it. So let's return to that and talk to Gordon Balmer, who's the Executive Director of the Petrol Retailers Association. Gordon, protests today with those in the protest pointing a finger of blame at the government, but also at the price of the pumps and the people who control that. What's your side of this?
Well, good afternoon, Alex. Thank you for having me on the show. Well, we've had obviously a very, very difficult time this year with the fact that we've had a war in the Ukraine. We've had issues as far as the dollar sterling exchange rate is concerned. And unfortunately, we've also had issues with COVID where some economies are still trying to get back on their feet again. So all that's caused major disruption in the wholesale price of petrol and diesel. And obviously, you're seeing the full effects, unfortunately, at the pumps right now.
After the Jubilee weekend, the wholesale price of fuel has actually gone down, but that hasn't been passed on to the consumer. Why?
Well, I would refute that, actually. If you actually look at what the RAC publish in terms of their average pump prices, they can be at least 24 hours out of date because they're taken from fuel card transactions. If you actually look at apps, there's a handy app you can download called petrolprices.com. You can actually see that there are plenty of fuel stations pricing at well below the average price. So in my area, I live in Hertfordshire, you've got the average price of petrol, for example, at around £1.90. I can see prices at well below that, and some of our members are telling us that they have actually reflected falls in their pump prices.
But do you think it's reasonable? The big fuel companies are actually profiting quite well as a result of the prices going up, and the government has now, after much pressure, gone down the route of imposing a windfall tax. Could they be doing more to make sure that consumers are a little bit better protected, almost as an act of goodwill during this difficult period?
Well, it's a hugely complicated subject. We've written to the CMA. They've got their report going into them on the 7th of July. We hope that will enable us to have a dialogue. We've asked for a meeting with Kwasi Kwarteng to explain how the fuel market works, and for my sector, which is the independent sector, to actually explain the pressures our members are under with rising costs, lower demand, and obviously the wholesale prices. Because let's face it, we all know the pressures that households and businesses are under, and our members don't want to price fuel where they're doing so at the moment, but they can't do it at a loss.
Gordon Balmer, thank you so much for coming on and giving us that side of it all, because it's a side we don't often get to hear. Executive Director of the Petrol Retailers Association. Well, we are in a tricky situation when it comes to fuel, aren't we? Do keep your thoughts coming in. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Well, yet again, there's hand-wringing over birth rates after the latest census has shown that while everyone is glued to their tellies, watching airbrushed bozos go at it on Love Island, none of our nookie is resulting in babies that will be the baggage handlers of the future. Meanwhile, commentators are all asking what's going on, as if the blindingly obvious is somehow hidden. Do I really need to itemise the societal failures that have made middle classes dodge mother care? Nobody can buy a house or afford childcare, and nobody is being encouraged to do so. In today's throwaway society, where we're so focused on individual needs, the idea of a man and a woman getting together, staying together, and combining their dwindling incomes to set up a house is as outdated as a summer getaway to a five-star hotel in Skeggy. It's quite simple. Get rid of stamp duty for first-time buyers, turn off porn, and suddenly people will start making babies, especially when there are reasonably priced nurseries to put them in. Well, the government has intervened today with measures to make childcare cheaper, including increasing the ratio of kids to carers. But while it might make things cheaper, will it see off a longer-term crisis for the country? Joining me now is Christina O'Done, Head of Family Policy at the Centre for Social Justice. Christina, always great to have you on the programme. What's your opinion of what's going on here and why birth rates are falling?
Well, as usual, Alex, you put everything so beautifully that I feel like I'm just repeating you. You're totally right. If we switched off porn, we'd have great relationships back in, and couples would be happier. You're also right. Childcare is just one of the issues. What we're seeing now is women in the UK having 1.59 babies per woman. And actually, the replacement fertility rate is 2.1. So if we want Britain to be at the same level of population that it is today, we need to have more babies. But babies cost. Babies cost about 250,000 from 0 to 21. And that's without counting any kind of private institution, no private childcare, no private childminders. So what can we do? We have to move because by 2050, a quarter of the British population is going to be over 65. And within the next 20 years, we're going to have 10 million more old age pensioners. So this is not just a shrinking population, this is an aging population. We should bake incentives into our system to address what I would call the fertility gap. And that means not just baby bonuses, which are being tried very successfully in countries like France and Hungary, but I doubt the Treasury would give us the money for that. But what we can do is think creatively. Like in Estonia, for instance, if you have a child, you can retire 1 year earlier than somebody without a child, full state pension paid. 2 children, you can retire 2 years earlier, and so forth. That, plus a much more generous parental leave than the one that we have in the UK, a year and a half of either father or mother taking parental leave, has meant that Estonia, since its crisis point of 2001, now has 20% more families with 3 children or more. Parental leave in this country could really benefit from having a review, especially when it comes to paternity leave, which only a quarter of new dads are taking because it is supposed to be taken in a very short, inflexible period. It's not when mother needs it, but when employer wants to give it to you. And it's not taken up by low-income dads because they have repeatedly told the CSJ, the Centre for Social Justice, that it is really difficult to get employers to allow for a dad to attend an antenatal test or to attend childbirth without some consequences to their employment. So we need to rethink the way that we do parental leave. We need to really consider whether it might not be a good idea to incentivize mums and dads by giving them a baby bonus. And then the final thing is the taxes. Right now, if you earn £50,000 and you are a 2-earner family, you save about 25% of the tax burden that a family that has only 1 earner and is also earning £50,000 will be spending. So we are, in effect, punishing single earner families, which just doesn't make sense. Because, of course, why would somebody be a single earner family? Because they want to stay at home and look after their children. And so we have a vicious circle here of families that are not able to have as many children as they want, and they're not able to look after them in the way that they want.
Christina, thank you. Christina O'Done, the Head of Family Policy at the Centre for Social Justice. Patrick, I think the elephant in the room here is culture, isn't it? Because it's a particular group of people not having children. And culturally, it seems to be the people in America they call the WASPs, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. They're the people who are not getting on with having kids. And do you think that the problem here is because, offices around the country have rooftop bars and breakout areas, but culturally, it's not trendy anymore to have families. People care about their work. They want to swipe left, swipe right. The family way is old-fashioned.
I don't quite agree with that. I certainly think we've got a terrible problem in Britain where the people who would make the best parents, across all the different ethnic groups, the functional, vaguely solvent people who strive for self-reliance are not having children. And at the top, you have almost a status symbol among the very rich, who are few in number, to have a big family. But also at the bottom, you have very dysfunctional people who are maybe used to long-term benefits dependency, whose benefits are quite often tailored to the number of children and the amount of dependency they produce within a family unit, including in regards to their place on the social housing ladder. So we incentivise large families among people who perhaps aren't well equipped to be parents, and we've seen some terrible cases flowing out of lockdown of people who frankly should never have been parents, and some really tragic consequences. And it is the people in the middle who it's too difficult for. I personally think the price of housing is a massive factor. Going back to the coalition, withdrawing child benefit from sort of hard-working middle earners is another big hit. The fact that a lot of graduates and nearly half of the people I'm talking about are graduates are now paying 9% in the pound marginal tax rate on top of child benefit withdrawal. It just makes, and soaring house prices in the southeast, that cocktail of factors makes them having children really bad. And we need to incentivise that. I'm certainly not someone who would go as far as some recent ideas about, hitting those who don't have children with extra taxes. I don't think that's viable.
No, it's dodgy indeed. Patrick, thank you so much. Well, hallelujah. Equalities Minister Kemi Badenoch is putting an end to mixed-sex toilets. Someone get that woman a medal and a job in number 10. Because when it comes to numbers 1 and 2, men and women do not want to share that moment together. Ever. The Stonewall-led madness to turn every communal toilet into a form of social torture has been pounced upon by property developers, saving cash by not having to build 2 separate blocks. While schools and hospitals, brainwashed by radical neoliberal lunacy, think they're doing some sort of moral service to an innately bigoted human population. Women find shared loos horrendous, with our times of the month and requirements to sit on a urine-splashed seat. But men hardly like the walk of shame either, nor the look of scorn emerging from a cubicle that's been nuked with last night's curry. Well, I'm joined now by author, broadcaster and co-founder of men's radio station, Russ Kane. Russ, every time I have this conversation, it tends to be with other girls, and we just think the idea of sharing toilets with men is, well, horrific. Tell me what do men think about it?
It's revolting. I don't understand. You know what? You summed it up, and you said 2 words, property developers. Ugh, right? Death eaters. So the whole notion, Alex, I don't know how we got to this stage. It's just like, it's completely bonkers. Nobody actually wants it. It's a small group of very loud, very vociferous people screaming on social media, screaming into their own echo chamber. And everybody else is going, but this is just nuts. Nobody wants this. It's vile. Not one woman that I know, and I've talked about this a lot, not one woman I know thinks it's a good idea. Not one guy I know thinks it's a good idea. So I don't know why it's still progressing. It's completely, I was going to say potty, but no pun intended. It's just unpleasant on every kind of level. I just don't understand how we got to this stage. It's just so peculiar.
I don't understand we got to a lot of stages in the way we are at the moment. But
well, I'm with you. I know.
Do men face the same sort of social awkwardness? Because for women, it makes your skin crawl having to go into the same toilet block as a man. But also, no offence to the men out there, you don't keep your toilets as clean with your aerial bombardment of the toilet seat.
Whoa, I do. I'm fanatical about it. But you're quite right. It ain't great. I see, if you... Let's move it to the absurd sort of level, right? So you're having a romantic dinner with somebody that you really want to go to. You do not want to, when everything's going swimmingly well, be sitting next to them in a toilet. I mean, wow, romance goes straight out the window. I just don't understand it. No one's comfortable with this. It's a private thing. I don't want to see, what women get up to in the toilet. It's down to them. I really do not want to get involved at all. And I'm sure that they feel the same. It's just a very, very peculiar notion. I think it's a blip, and I think we'll look back on many aspects, as I'm listening to what you were just saying, Alex, many aspects of what's going on in 2021, 2022, and think, Did the world have a collective nervous breakdown? Because I honestly think that's what it is.
Russ, I think it did. And I think constantly
that's
we're encouraged to have one as well, which makes things even worse. Russ Kane, it's always fantastic having you on men's radio there.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for asking me.
Patrick, I'm going to throw this awkward one to you. Do you know what? I haven't seen them in the flesh, thank the Lord, but apparently there are even mixed gender toilets like that have urinals in them. Urinals? What sort of woman wants to walk past a row of men?
Well, I agree with what's been said by both of you. And actually, one of the advantages from a male point of view to separate sex toilets in public buildings is, you know, we tend to get through quite quick. If you kind of notoriously at sporting venues or at theatres, the queue for the gents kind of works its way through a lot quicker because the urinal is a more efficient and less time-consuming way of going to the loo for men. But, you know, fundamentally, I don't want my wife, my mother, my daughter having to share toilet facilities with men. And I think, you know, a lot of this unisex solution is being driven by, you know, this unholy alliance, as we heard, between property developers on the one hand, but also the militant trans movement on the other, the idea of not excluding people who identify as one gender despite being born into the other sex. You know, I think I'd never like a unisex loo, and I think it's a step backwards in our civilization, as I think the vast majority of people do.
Yeah, civilization's gone to the dogs. I couldn't agree more. Well, lots of you have been getting in touch about the latest scandal to engulf the Prime Minister, and there's much to discuss on our social channels. Ian says, apparently all MPs knew about this man, but none of them spoke up. We need to get rid of the lot of them. Kenny says, what difference does a day make? Pincher resigned and was then suspended. Boris Johnson was not responsible for his actions. And Judith says, why is no one talking about Labour MPs who have broken the law? It's not only Conservatives, and no one is talking about Beergate and the fine. Well, that's all I've got time for today. You can join me again, same time, same place, for We Need to Talk About on GB News tomorrow, 2 o'clock. Coming up next, it's The Briefing with Darren, but first, it's the weather forecast. Bye-bye.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGibbon from the Met Office. A breezy day with showers in the north, but drier weather further south with some sunshine, although there is a lot of cloud at the moment as a couple of features sink south across the UK. Low pressure to the north, but high pressure is edging in, and that through the week will bring more and more settled weather, drier and warmer conditions for many, but not for all, because there will be some rain at times in the north and northwest especially, and a keen breeze at times, and that's the case through the rest of the day. The showers continuing for northern England, Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some heavy downpours for northeast Scotland, and that blustery breeze making it feel cool, 17 or 18 Celsius. But further south, with some sunshine coming through away from areas of cloud, 22 to 24 Celsius, so feeling warm with lighter winds. Through the evening, any showers in the north tend to fade away, but there'll still be a few continuing for the north and northwest of Scotland, 1 or 2 coming into northwest England, North Wales. More persistent rain perhaps for Northern Ireland, where it will be cloudy and 12 degrees. 10 or 11 elsewhere with some clear spells, especially towards the south and the east. So some sunshine first thing for southern England, the Midlands into eastern England. Bright spells as well for Scotland, with a few showers affecting northwest England, North Wales and Northern Ireland. But spell of more prolonged rain turns up later in the afternoon into western Scotland and parts of Northern Ireland. And again, high teens in the north, low 20s further south, not quite as warm, and actually a fair amount of cloud again for central and southern parts of the UK. So although the trend through the week is for dry conditions in the south and changeable in the north, there will be a lot of cloud for many. And it's going to be a damp day on Wednesday for western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Further south, some sunshine and turning warmer Thursday and Friday.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to